been coaching people. He has been coaching people for 30 years in becoming better communicators as well as leaders. Some of Dave's clients include Ericsson, HP, Enterprise, FedEx, Greater Dallas Chamber of Commerce, and TI, just to name a few. And while most people like to be introduced for their successes, Dave asked me to have some fun with his introduction, as he wanted to share some of his biggest failures. So, number one, he was fired from his first job because of a sense of humor. And number two, he was so nervous in his first two business presentations that he fainted.
Oh no.
And number three, if I could get a drum roll, please. He is a lifelong Buffalo Bills fan, but we are not going to hold that against him. We're not, Dave, because we all know that hockey is the coolest game on earth. Go Dallas Stars! Thank you again for being here this morning, and thank you, Dave, for being our speaker. I hand it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Heather, and glad you had a little fun at my expense. Where we're going today is going to help you to avoid your audience members when you're speaking in meetings, presentations, looking like this. In the past couple of weeks, I'm willing to bet you've all been on a number of Zoom or Adobe or Teams meetings. How many of you have ever felt like this when you're on the receiving end? If so, pull up your reactions and give us a thumbs up if you've ever felt like this while you were sitting in one of those virtual meetings. Couple of you. Heather got applause. All right, several of you. And I'm willing to bet those that didn't give the thumbs up simply aren't completely tuned in yet. So where we're going today during the next hour or so is show you some tools and techniques so that you can avoid doing this to your audiences. So where are we going? That's going to very much be dependent on what you think about virtual presentations. So I've got a poll. I like involving people as much as possible right up front. So share your answers. Click on what you think about virtual presentations compared to face-to-face ones. So read through the options, click the one that you think applies best to you. And I'm going to wait until we get a good number of responses. I see 20 people in the room. Got 12, 13 responses so far. Get a couple more. All right, closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So here's what we got. Most people feel virtual presenting about the same, so prepare about the same. Some think virtual presenting is harder, so they prepare more. Nobody surprisingly said virtual presenting is easier. I'm glad to see that, actually, because I think that's one of the huge pitfalls to virtual presentations is we have a tendency to think it's easier so I can relax. And unfortunately, our energy sits down with us, like you saw on that first slide. Here's where we're going. We're going to spend a couple of minutes on how to structure your message so you you capture and keep your audience's attention. Most of us structure our presentations around PowerPoint. Big mistake. Next, how can we deliver our message effectively so that we keep our energy up, thereby keeping the audience's energy up? Next up, how can we use technology, some basics with Zoom or whatever platform you're using to keep your audience engaged? And lastly, how to create visuals that are dynamic and appealing to the audience's eyes, as well as increasing attention and retention. I will give you a little bit of a teaser. Most of us create slides that do just the opposite. They lower attention, they lower retention, and they work against us. Couple of administrative things. I keep the chat box open throughout. Anytime you have a question, feel free to type that into the chat box, and I will capture most of those as we go along. If I miss a couple, then some of the folks in the background are going to help me out along the way. I also ask, if you haven't yet, I believe everybody has. Yes, everybody's muted. Cool. I just wanted to make sure everybody's muted so that Zoom doesn't get accidentally confused and switch the active camera to someone else. So there's kind of our agenda. So what do you struggle with as it relates to presenting or communicating online? Another poll for you. By the way, if you haven't learned already, if you're thinking you're coming in here to just be passively involved, not gonna happen. So which of these represents your challenges? You can select more than one here. Looks like there's 13. I was wondering if we've only got 12 people that are able to respond to polls, but we've got 13. Biggest struggle, luckily that's where we're going first, is struggle with getting started and wrapping up. I also use juggling sometimes in workshops, and the hardest part of juggling is starting and stopping, because that's the only time you have 3 balls in 2 hands. Let's see, some other challenges. Can't keep train of thought. Don't know what to do with my hands. It's the Ricky Bobby, I don't know what to do with my hands, if you're a Talladega Nights fan. And I don't know where I should be looking. How to start, how to stop is the biggest challenge many of you mentioned. So that's where we're going to go first. We want to make sure we've got a structured presentation, not dictated by PowerPoint, but that's dictated by our topics and our main concepts that we're going to go through. And we want to take advantage of the way audiences' memories work. Now, normally in full-blown workshops or longer sessions or seminars, I'll do a memory quiz, but we don't really have time to do that here. So I'll show you what the basics are of this memory quiz. And it is, I share with people 15 things I ask them to try to remember. Bananas, rice, almonds, apples, oatmeal. Went too quick there. Almonds, oranges, Luka Doncic, wheat bread, pinto beans. Strawberries, oranges, fish, grapes, and quinoa. Now, using the group chat box, I'm thinking in Adobe Connect terms, in using the chat box, which of these, just type in which ones you think most people, if not all people, remember when I give them this list of 15 things. So type away. Which ones of those items do you think people remember? Item at the top of the list, bananas, says Maria. Bananas, rice, pinto beans, quinoa. Right? Luca, absolutely. All right, so here's what most people remember. Bananas. Why? First on the list. We remember how things start. What else do they remember? Quinoa. Somebody had mentioned that in the chat box. We remember how things finish. Books, movies, as well as lists and presentations. What else do they remember? Things that are repeated. Almonds, oranges. And lastly, remember Luka Doncic because it's so weird. It's very different compared to the rest of the list. So we've got to keep that in mind when structuring our message. We've got to start strong. We've got to finish strong because the audience remembers that easily. We repeat key points because they remember that easily. And if we really want them to remember something else, find a way to make it stand out. Change the font color on a slide. Have a story that illustrates it. Use a very different visual to represent it. What we don't want to do is start off with what most people do, and that is introducing themselves. Let's face it, most of us aren't really comfortable talking about ourselves. So the worst thing we can do at the beginning is start by talking about something we're uncomfortable with, because it can come off as uncertain, lack of confidence. It could come off like, well, I guess we should get started. Well, let me introduce myself first. My name's Dave Gunby, and I've been doing training for, right? And that's the first impression you create with your audience. Is that really the impression you want to create, that they easily remember? So most of us aren't comfortable talking about ourselves. I think even worse are the people that are really comfortable talking about themselves. And by starting off that way, hi, I'm Dave. You're probably wondering what makes Dave so great. So let me tell you a little bit about Dave. Again, your presentation should be about the content, so that's where you want to start first. How do we do that? We capture attention at the outset by engaging the audience's attention. You've seen effective speakers do this. There's a number of ways that it can be done. One way is to ask questions. That's what most trainers do, and that's what I did at the very outset. How many of you, and I asked for the thumbs up icon. So you can ask a question or a series of questions. Just be careful that you phrase it so that you know the answer you're going to get. The last thing you want to do is have the audience answer in such a strange way that it throws you off balance. You could start with a startling statistic that relates to your topic. Again, either one of these is going to quickly engage your audience into your content. You could tell a story, maybe not a Harry Potter story, but a story that relates to your topic, that illustrates a main concept that you're going to get into more later on. Or a quotation from someone well-known. I could have started off our talk here by saying, the famous poet Robert Frost once said, half the world is composed of people who have something to say but can't, and the other half who have nothing to say and keep on saying it. Number of other techniques you can use, but those are the biggest ones, the most common ones that I've seen. So first you engage their attention, then you tell them what's their payoff to listening. Tell them the big benefit they'll get from paying attention to the presentation. So my engager was a question. My payoff statement was, today you'll learn how not to put your audiences to sleep. And then lastly, preview your topics. Give them the agenda. We all like knowing where we're being led. So give them the roadmap. That's really what a topics preview is a roadmap. Once you've opened your presentation, now it's time to get into the body. of the presentation. And within that, there are three things we want to do. First, state the topic. Use the same phrasing we did in the preview, because we remembered almonds, we remembered oranges. So we repeat, same phrasing, same wording. Don't get too wordsmithy on that, because if you change the phrasing enough, you lose the benefit of repetition. Once you've stated the topic, now you've got to prove its benefit. You've got to prove that it's real. You've got to substantiate what you're saying isn't just your point of view, but is well known to experts, or there are some statistics that give evidence there. Once you've done that, then it's time to transition to the next topic, where you go through the same process, stating the topic, proving it, substantiating it, and then transitioning to the next one. Is there a magic number of topics in the group chat? What do you think? I'll give you an answer. There is a magic number. What is the magic number? What do you think? 3, 6. Scott says 3. Pat says 6. Heather, 5 or less. Raga says, or is it Raja? I'm going to guess Raja. I think I heard that 3. Well, the correct, quote unquote, correct answer is 3. There is something that's actually been researched called the rule of 3. People tend to give more credibility to things that are organized in 3s. Think about stories we tell. I saw May's little son there in the background. When we tell stories, there's always 3s. Blind mice, little pigs, bears. In literature, there was musketeers. In entertainment, there's stooges. In the Olympics, there's Sidious, Altius, Fortius, Veni, Vidi, Vici. From the Romans, I came, I saw, I conquered. Okay, thank you, Raja. Boy, I hope, Raja, give me a yes or no. Am I pronouncing your name right? Is it Raja or Raga? Raja, give me a thumbs up if it, or a yes if it's Raga. Okay, got it, locked in. So whenever possible, organize it into 3, but it's not a law. It's not on a tablet somewhere. It's a guideline. Once you've gone through the body of the presentation, now it's time to wrap things up. So we've got a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's the 3 again. A good strong close, and I saw May do this at the beginning. A good strong close has 3 important elements as well. Main topics review, same wording to get the benefit of repetition. If you have your audience walk out and they remember your 3 main topics, you're doing better than most. So do a main topics review, same phrasing, same order. Then do your Q&A session if you haven't had Q&As throughout. And the big change is after Q&A, final statement. What is it you want the one key thing you want them to remember? The action you want them to take. What you want them to do with that information. Ultimately, that's your final statement. And we put that after the Q&A so that we take control back, so that we control the last thing said, because that's one of the things the audience remembers. If we let the audience dictate the last thing said, then often our presentation or our status update, our project update, whatever message you're delivering, finishes with a really weak finish, for lack of a better term. We've often seen this. So are there any other questions? No? No questions? Okay. Thank you. And that's what the audience walks out remembering. That's your lasting impression. That's not the one you want, though. Structuring your message is critical. And that's usually the first thing you want to do, but it's not the only critical dimension of a good presentation. Delivery is critical as well. One more poll. This is the last one. This one has to do with how do we communicate? Some research done in the late 60s at UCLA looked at communication as having three components. There's three again. One of them comprises 7% of impact, one comprises 38, and the other one is 55%. Read through the options here. Which one do you think is accurate? Content is the words you say. Voice is how your voice projects at volume, inflection, rate, pauses. And body language is facial, hands, posture, movement. Looks like the voting is stopped. 1/4 of you said content 7, voice 55, body language 38. But slightly more than 2/5, I had to do quick math there, said content 7, voice 38, body language 55. So which is it? There we have proof that all of you are smarter than one of us. So you were right. Most of you had that right. Body language 55, voice 38, content 7. That doesn't mean your words don't matter. What that means is if your body language contradicts your words, your audience will tend to believe what your body says. If your voice contradicts your words, then your audience will tend to believe what your voice says. In the virtual world, body language is diminished in importance because there's less of your body showing, if any at all. What happens then is voice takes up the slack. Content generally stays at a low number. It makes sense for us to practice and work on our delivery vehicle and not just the content. For example, in a virtual presentation, who's going to engage you more and show that they're more confident in their material? The one on the left or the one on the right? Pretty easy. Here's the thing, neither one of them is actually looking at a person. The one on the left is looking at the camera. So as a presenter in the virtual world, you've got to get over looking at people, and you've got to get better at looking at a thing, and that is your webcam. It doesn't mean you have to have 100% eye contact, but if you can get 2/3 of your time looking at the webcam, you're going to make the audience feel like you're connecting with them, that you're talking to them. It's kind of like being on TV. Those news anchors are told to talk to the camera like it's a good friend. Your voice is critical as well. Some elements on the voice, volume, and I'll share with you some quick fixes if you struggle with any of these. Volume, inflection, rate, purposeful pauses. So in the group chat, I'm going to put in a little separator here. Of those, pauses, volume, rate, inflection, which of those do you struggle with? Which one's hardest for you? Or do you think it's your weakest? So you can only type in one in the chat box. Pauses from Heather. What is inflection? Inflection is modulation in the voice. So think the opposite of inflection is monotone. If someone delivers a talk like this, that would be the opposite of inflection. Okay, so Yosra says inflection, volume, purposeful pauses. speed or rate from Mary Ellen, pauses, volume. Okay, so we're across the board, couple of it on each of those. I will tell you that trying to work first on voice is going to work against you because it can create an inauthentic sound. If you're trying to have more inflection without having the physical precursor, it's going to sound like this. If you've ever taken a tour from somebody who's done the tour forever and they're just tired, it's like, over on your left in the wilds of Africa exhibit. And it just doesn't sound real. If you've ever watched a behind the scenes making of an animated movie, the actors doing the voice work are doing all of the physical movements that their animated characters are doing because they know that's how you sound authentic with your voice. So what are the physical precursors to enhancing your voice? Here's the physical changes. So if you want better volume, check your posture. Standing or seated, are you sitting or standing to your full height? Are your shoulders basically underneath your ears, or are you rolled forward like most of us at the computer? And your breath. Most people, when I coach them to take a deep breath, will do this. That's great if you're about to bench press. That's awful if you're trying to relax and monitor your rate. If you want to change your breath, make the exhale as long as the inhale. So if you inhale for a count of 4, your exhale should be at least for a count of 4. Inflection. You want to add more inflection? This is one of my challenges. I know my voice, if I'm not paying attention, is close to monotone. So what I've learned to do is add bigger and more intentional gestures and allow my face to get engaged and involved in the presentation. Even though I'm on the introverted side of the scale, I have to become the biggest version of myself when I'm presenting, whether it's virtual or face-to-face. So gesture bigger, gesture more, and gesture with your face too. All right, I say Priya breathing, that's you breathing. Hopefully the second one, Priya, not the first one. I agree with you, Roger. If you're going to talk on the phone, stand up, gesture like a crazy person. If you're presenting virtually, there's a drawback to doing it standing if they can see you. And that is very few of us know how to stand with a firm base. Most of us kind of vibrate, shifting our weight from side to side. If you do that in a presentation on a small screen like this, you're going to give the audience motion sickness. It does come with its challenges, but it does create more energy. So you're right about the even if no webcam. Rate. This one in the virtual world, you've just got to practice pausing. Give me a thumbs up if you have ever been told you speak too fast. So go to the reactions, give a thumbs up if you speak too fast or have been told you do. Wow, about a third of us answered, 7 or 8 of us. I have not ever, hang on a second. I have not ever had someone who spoke too fast. And I've been doing this for close to 30 years. What I do see is people who never pause. Generally speaking, I can follow you even if you're a faster talker. But I just need you to pause every once in a while so that I can have the experience of, I see what she's saying. I get that. So practice pausing. It may simply be you have a little bit of a key to help you with that. Like a glass of water nearby. Or you get in the habit of each time you click a slide, you pause. So rate and pauses go hand in hand. If you want to work on better pauses, gave you a couple of tips already. If your rate of speech is, I just thought of another one that I forgot to put on here. If you have been told you speak too fast, then check your rate of gestures. Odds are you've got your gestures in close and you're doing a lot of really sharp, quick gestures. So you may need to expand the magnitude of your gestures, get them away from you a little bit more, thereby making them more deliberate. Then your voice will follow along. But our voice tends to follow our body. Already given you a few tips on hands and gestures. Even in the virtual world, we want to gesture and frame ourselves so that the audience can see some of those gestures. We want them to be frequent, but not necessarily nonstop. And quote unquote natural. They become natural the more we practice them, especially for those of us who are a little bit quieter, more reserved, like me. Varied. There's a difference between a lot of hand movement and specific gestures. If I'm talking about going from here to there, that's a gesture. If I'm talking about going from here to there, this is just flipping hands. And then after a while, this becomes a distraction for the audience, whether you're virtual or face-to-face. So change them up, have them be specific and descriptive. And facial animation, did I do an annotation? Fascinating that I did that. Oh, that must be on the slide. Facial animation shows that it matters. It's even more important in the virtual world because that's almost all they see, if they see part of you. It conveys your emotion. It shows sincerity that you care about your topic, that you're interested, because the more interested you are, the better chance the audience will be. Their interest level is never going to exceed yours. So you want to make sure you're conveying interest and excitement within a professional realm for your topic. And it helps with adding inflection. Boy, that's going to bother me. I cannot get rid of that. There we go. I knew I could do it. All right, so your body language is going to be your primary method of engaging the audience, but technology can help as well. So what are some tips in the group chat box? What have you heard? What do you know is a good way to engage your audience, keep them listening? So type some responses in the chat. Purposeful pauses, be willing to wait them out like I just did. Polls, competitive ones. Yeah, one of the things about Zoom that I don't like is it has a limited functionality when it comes to polls. Keep them engaged by asking questions, having them use their fingers as well as their brains. Some other tips as it relates to your setup. Avoid backlighting. Some of you may have seen, I noticed that I've got a window to my left and there was some ambient light coming in from behind, and it kept me from lighting my face as well as it could be. Frame yourself with headroom so that you've got space on either side, and you're far enough away that they can see some of your gestures. I see Pat mentioned ask questions, call on people by name, or even when they type in answers to questions you've asked, use their names there. People like hearing their names. Even when the speaker struggles with pronouncing them, right? Use a quiet room. I always have plug-in earbuds. I've also got earbuds. I've also got a full-on headset, but it makes me feel like I'm a traffic controller. Position yourself so that you're about eye level with your webcam. It just creates a more natural feel for the audience. And make sure you test out your settings beforehand so you got the right mic and the right speakers. Right. Telling a joke, I wanted to come back to thank you for mentioning that, Brenda. If I'm a big fan of humor, obviously, there's only one person you can safely make fun of. Who is it? In the chat box, who is it? Absolutely, it's got to be yourself, and it's got to be a parent. I was raised Roman Catholic, but if I started off today, and I do have a joke about Roman Catholics, I'm not going to tell it, but if I had started off telling a joke about Roman Catholics, you can't look at me and know that I was raised Roman Catholic. You know, long ago, I was able to get the guilt off of my face. See, now I can make the joke. Before I couldn't. I used to love competing in Toastmasters, and one of my favorite competitors started off a speech telling a joke about how Mexicans love beans. Here's the thing. He had already been introduced, and his name was Luis Gutierrez. He can tell the joke because he was making fun of himself. So if you feel, Marielle, if you, gosh, I got so disrupted by Mary Ellen feeling guilty. So us Catholics have to stick together. Boy, I've completely disrupted my train of thought now. Oh, make fun of yourself. Humor is different than jokes. That's okay. You don't need to apologize. There's more of the guilt. Humor is different than telling jokes. I usually discourage people from telling jokes because even good joke tellers have them bomb versus situational humor. It's a little bit different. If you start off with, let me start with a joke, then you automatically change the audience's expectations. And they are like, okay, go ahead, funny guy. Make me laugh. And using the chat box, I always keep the chat box open. So open it up before you start presenting, monitor every once in a while, scroll back just to make sure. Unless it's a short presentation, then you might want to wait until the end. And answer when it's appropriate. Good use of technology keeps the audiences engaged. We mentioned polls, animate your slides. That's an undervalued thing. If you've got one slide that's got a bunch of bullets, I'm not a big fan of bullets, we'll talk about those in a second, then don't show them all at once because the audience reads faster than you can talk and they read ahead. So animate your slides, use the chat, use status indicators. That's an easy one. Get people to play along. And breakout rooms. Now, if we had a little bit more time, if we had an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours today, I would have done some things with a breakout group, but we just didn't have the time. What's a status indicator? That's the thumbs up or the applause, or there's one for go faster or go slower. As a co-host, I don't have access to those, but thank you for asking that, Mary Ellen. Not everyone knows what I mean by that. Technology isn't limited just to the engagement tools. It's also how you use visuals. Most visuals don't add value. Most of what we see out there, we've heard death by PowerPoint. That's because we're just abusing the bejeebers out of it. So much so that several years ago, Jeff Bezos outlawed it at executive meetings. And the problem isn't PowerPoint. The problem is, as the old saying goes, the problem isn't the arrow, it's the archer. What we do with PowerPoint is sinful. I can remember when slides looked like this. They were expensive. You got charged per word, so you didn't put words on there. You used images and charts. So Bezos outlawed it, but he's not alone. At the Super Collider, when they had executive meetings here in Texas, they outlawed it there. Even LinkedIn doesn't allow it in their executive meetings. And I think it's personally sad because it's not the PowerPoint that's the problem. It's us and what we do with it. So what can we do differently? We've got to rethink our approach to slides. If your slides need to be a document, that's a different purpose. They should be different things. I always think about, there's an old Saturday Night Live skit about this, gosh, I've forgotten the name of the product, but it was so, if anyone remembers the name, you're going to date yourself, but it's a floor wax and a dessert topping, right? Those are two very different things. They should look very different. Slides for a presentation aren't the same thing as a document. They should look very different. And the data is incontrovertible. And we'll talk about that briefly here in a second. So we want our slides to be simple. We want them to be large, easily seen on any size screen. We want them to be colorful and aesthetically attractive and consistent. Don't keep changing formats so that the audience has no idea what's next. Effective slide design abides by shimmer floor wax. Thank you, Mary Ellen. It abides by science. What are the scientific principles that I use to design my slides? Something called cognitive load theory. We'll touch briefly on what that is. Well, I'll give you the high level. Cognitive load theory says that the audience, we cannot do multitasking. As much as we say it, it doesn't happen. We can't listen to a speaker and read at the same time. Bottom line, cannot do it. What we do is we multi-switch, or we fast switch. We can't do them both at the same time. What we can do is something called dual coding, where we can listen to something and look at an image, or pick up a word or two. The second one is redundancy effect. If what your slide says is the same thing you're saying, audience retention drops by 17%. It actually makes them less attentive. And lastly, assertion evidence format was studied at Penn State in 2002 by Michael Alley in the physics department. And what he found was having, instead of a title, having an assertion at the top of your slide, so a headline, and then evidence in the rest of the slide, a chart, a picture illustrating it, a video that demonstrates it. That's when we have more powerful visuals. What we don't want to do is this. We've all seen this. Not only is the speaker blocking and making this worse, but the slide is awful. We want slides to be on our side. So what does that mean? Side S, substantiate with charts to persuade your audience. Illustrate with images to enhance their memory. Demonstrate it with video to really make it sticky, and add emotional components to it to really bind to multiple layers in their brain. Don't just do data dump, because as much as we hate to admit it, neuroscience tells us every decision we make has an emotional component to it. I saw this happen when a good friend of mine had a traumatic brain injury, and he basically lost access to his prefrontal cortex and his limbic system. You can have a conversation with Rick, but he can't make a decision. If you said, Rick, do you want pizza or steak for dinner. He can't choose. So appeal to emotions through the images that you use. If you have to use bullets, be careful, right? Too many words engages that redundancy effect. So limit yourself to about 4 bullets per slide. Use animations to control the audience's attention. Limit yourself to about 4 words per bullet. Keep in mind that words trap the audience's eyes and yours as the speaker. The more words you've got on the slide, the more likely you are to do this. Then you break eye contact with your audience. Words trap, pictures don't. Some examples, some before and after. This isn't bad. We've seen this, but that's a title. It doesn't tell me anything. I have to work really hard to make sense of what are the relationships and the numbers. What that's doing is increasing intrinsic cognitive load. Basically, it's making it harder for the audience. I want to make it easier for them. So I want to reduce the cognitive load. And there are 3 types of cognitive load, but I'll keep it simple. Here's the after. Before, after. Notice how much more quickly you can internalize this one. I could have animated the chart so that it shows 1 pie piece at a time, but this shows relationships. This makes it easier for me to make sense of, and it's got a headline or an assertion that makes me more powerful as a presenter, makes me more assertive. This was from an SMU student. I teach in the MBA program there. And I asked the student, I said, what's that slide telling me? And I could give you an hour typing answers into the group chat. You'd never get it. Her answer was, Warsaw is centrally located for business in Europe. What's missing from the slide? Someone type it in the chat. What's missing from the slide? Warsaw, a map. So here's the before, here's the after. Now it actually tells me what's the main point. It gives me the takeaway right up front. You can get anywhere from Warsaw in Europe. Now I could have added Europe, but it wouldn't have fit on the one line. Now it shows me visually Warsaw to Moscow, 704 miles. That's like from, well, Warsaw to Madrid, that's like Dallas to Seattle. Now I'm making it have a visual impact. Now it's really a visual aid. More eye movement makes unnecessary work for the speaker. This is not bad, but if you've got a legend on a pie chart, then the audience is going through this, okay, a pie chart and a color and so. And then what if they've got a bad monitor and they can't tell the difference between the shades of blue, or 7% of men are red-green colorblind and I can't tell what's red and what's green. I can't save them the trouble. Put the labels on the chart, on the column, put it on the pie pieces, on the line chart, so that the audience doesn't have to go through all of that work. There's the after. Pretty simple. You just use data labels. This one isn't bad either, but the bullets are unnecessary because that's my job as the presenter. The more words I put on there, the less attention you're paying to what the star of the slide is, and that's the chart. Here's the after. Right? Just a simple tweak. Get rid of the bullets. That's my job. So I'll still add this information about more choices, high quality, and opportunity. But I don't want you spending time reading. I want you spending time looking at the visual and listening to me. Here's an example on a chart, on a slide of redundancy. So the text is saying the same thing as the chart, plus I've got the legend. So this one just makes it harder for the audience. I want to make it easier for them to internalize. So we want to get rid of titles. There's a title. that doesn't excite me. It doesn't tease me into want to reading further. But if I change it to business is trending this quarter, features becomes Bills Express, that's the name of a product, is easy, fast, and cheap to use. Steps versus, whoops, too quick. 3 steps lead to business success, communication skills. So you see how that changes. So now a quick quiz. In the chat, what are some things that you would do differently to this slide, given what we've just talked about? Simplify, okay? Tell me more, Mary Ellen, or anyone else. How would you simplify it? Yep, chart and graph versus isolated decontextualized numbers, 4x4 rule. And here's the, I'll share with you, there's a great TEDx video out there by David J.P. Phillips, something about how to avoid death by PowerPoint. There's one thing in there that he's actually wrong about because he hasn't read the research, but he's got a great 18-minute video about PowerPoint construction. One of his precepts that I strongly abide by is 1 point per slide. How many points are on this slide? Just a quick guess. What do you think? How many points are there here? Yeah, 725. Well, there's at least one for each bullet. And then there's the data points. And then there's the text that goes with the data points. So there's at least 25 points here. This is good as an infographic, but that's not what slides are for. We also want to give this a headline, right? Bourbon by the numbers doesn't tell me anything. Think about headline writers. They have to tell you something that makes you then want to click on the headline and read further. Now, what we don't want to do is be clickbaity in our headlines. We want to be still businessy. I'm not sure that's a word, but we'll go with it. But make a statement. It should be a complete thought. And it might even wrap to a second line, and that's completely okay. A couple of other examples. This one isn't bad, but I can make it easier by doing this. Here it has a title. Now it's got a headline. I got rid of the legend, even though there's only 2 variables, that's pretty easy, but why not make it as easy as possible? Aesthetically, if you're going to do something like this, a quotation of somebody, get a decent image. There are so many free sources out there. Unsplash.com, pixabay.com, Pexels, Pexels.com. So you can take something that looks kind of schlocky like this and make it look a little bit nicer. At the beginning, we talked about how we've all dozed off or felt like we were about to doze off in a virtual presentation. Today, we shared with you some techniques to help you avoid that by going over how to structure your message to capture and keep attention, how to deliver with some impact while still staying authentic, how to use technology, and how to use visual aids that help you with your message. So I've got a couple more minutes. We've answered some questions throughout. What other questions? So feel free to raise your hand and unmute or type something into the chat box while I grab another sip of coffee. What else can we talk about? Because I crammed a 2-day workshop into 50 minutes. Okay, the side slides, you bet. Unfortunately, I didn't title that one. Oh, good guess, Dave. So substantiate with a chart, illustrate with an image. And by the way, I'm happy to share these slides with you all. There's nothing really proprietary here. So if you're interested, I will forward these to Pat and Heather and Martin and anyone that would like them, and they can forward them to anyone. So demonstrate with the video and use emotions to make a connection. Okay, tips for speakers with English as a second language. Critical for you is your rate of speech in the first minute. You have a different accent than your audience. You just need to give them a little bit of time to make an adjustment, to start understanding, start understanding your idiosyncrasies and your approach. So that first minute will need to be a little bit more deliberate. If you have, many languages allow for faster rate of speech than English, because English has so many Germanic origins. There's lots of sounds, whereas some others have lots more vowel concentration and allow for a faster rate. So it may be that you need to slow your rate, add more pauses up front. And it also may be that you want to open your mouth a little bit more. Imagine that you've got a pen on your upper lip. While you're speaking, you want that pen to be moving. But if you're talking really fast, odds are you're not opening your mouth as much. So the metaphorically, the pen would never move. Okay, if you open up for Q&A but need to stick to the 10-minute time frame, rehearse at 15% less than your time frame. So if you're given an hour, your time frame and rehearsal should be 50 minutes max, because the real presentation is going to run long. If you're given an hour and that includes Q&A, then your time frame is in effect 45 minutes and your rehearsal should be at about 38. Especially in the virtual world, it takes a lot longer for people to respond. Oh, wait, I was doing this over here. Dave asked me to fill out this poll. And so it takes a little bit longer. All right, so here's your last challenge. Don't do this anymore to your audience. Use the techniques we've talked about here today. Practice them every opportunity, even when you're not presenting, but just a participant at a meeting virtually. And then when it comes time to present, it's more of a habit. And then you can focus more on your message. I enjoyed speaking with you all today. I guess I give this back to Heather. So thank you all for attending and giving me the opportunity. I'll hand it back to Heather.
Dave, thank you so much for being a part of our breakfast meeting today. You have given us some amazing tools, and I know that we'll definitely try them out next week. Thank you so much. If everyone looks into the chat, there is the menti.com number that we need to use. And we need
Heather,
to
I'm sending out to the in the chat again. So
Yes. Thank you, Martin. I was going to do that too. So thank you for doing that. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.